Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Sekulow.
The big win out of the U.S. Court of Appeals from the Ninth Circuit. 3 judges there saying that the Trump administration's Title X planning, which no federal funding of abortion, was constitutional. Cece, kind of set the stage for that one. Then I want to move to this Louisiana situation.
Okay, so we just had the win that Title X, which has been a law since the 1970s, yes, it's a law. The federal government does not have to fund abortions, and they don't, and they're not going to give funding to any pregnancy family planning center that does abortions or refers for abortions or counsels for abortions. And so it is a huge win, but it really is just enforcing the law and supporting the Russ v. Sullivan Supreme Court case. All
right, so Than, let's talk, let's go back to this for a moment here, just to get historically significant. This is not it's new written versions of the rules, but the rule's been around for well over 30 years.
Yeah, even before the rules, Jay. The statute itself says that they are not to be intended for abortion services. There was, of course, a challenge during the Reagan administration. As you said repeatedly, the Supreme Court upheld those regulations. But in the intervening decades, Jay, pro-choice, let's call them pro-abortion administrations, have reversed the rules. And in fact, they've gone directly against the statute and have, in fact, required that pro-life centers actually refer for abortion. So, Jay, essentially what they've done is they've pushed pro-life providers out of this market. What this rule did is just return us to the statutory requirements that say, look, these dollars, no matter how you feel about abortion, these dollars are for family planning services, not for abortion. It returned them to that statutory footing. And Jay, I would just reiterate the ACLJ's involvement in this. We were asking for this rule before the Trump administration even came into office. They gave it to us. Very good language inside the rule. We filed legal comments. Many of our members did as well. Then, of course, we had to litigate them in court. I suspect we'll have to defend the rule all the way to the Supreme Court. But look, you could not have asked for a better rule, has sound footing in the law, and it's a pro-life rule.
We got an interesting question came in on Facebook, and if you want to talk to us on there, you could do that as well, or comments on Facebook on 1-800-684-3110. Debbie on Facebook says, does this rule do anything for pro-life centers? The answer is yes, because what this is providing is resources for other institutions. Right. Go ahead,
So
Cece.
Previously, the way that the past administrations had developed this rule and law was that you had to get this funding, you had to refer for abortions. Well, then that cancels out all the pro-life centers because, of course, they do not do that. So now, going back to Title X and the actual language of the statute itself and this new final rule from the Trump administration, now all of those pro-life centers can receive funding.
All right. So that's the good news on the California-Oregon front. But there's also, let me tell you what's going to happen on that, and I'll go to Professor Hutchinson on this. There's what's called a petition for rehearing en banc, which means the Planned Parenthood has come now before the entire Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, not just a 3-judge panel, asking them to intervene.
Absolutely. So here,
good chance they will.
The composition of the Ninth Circuit, the entire composition is very, very important because more likely than not, the entire Ninth Circuit will review this case, and it's very possible they will reverse this particular Ninth Circuit panel. So at the end of the day, this case likely will wind up before the United States Supreme Court. And it's very, very important, very, very imperative that we continue to nominate justices who are prepared to enforce the rule of law and the text of the statutory language. President Trump has nominated, and we've confirmed Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh. So at the end of the day, it's very, very likely this case will continue, in part because the Ninth Circuit en banc may indeed reverse this Ninth Circuit panel.
All right, when we come back from the break, Missouri. There's one. Denies new license to Planned Parenthood, and a court just issued an injunction in that case against Missouri. So we're going to talk about that. And your support of the ACLJ makes this happen. So we're in a matching challenge campaign. Let me encourage you to go to aclj.org. Any amount you donate to the ACLJ is matched. aclj.org, or call the number on your screen. Back with more in just a moment.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
Before I get to what's happened in Missouri, which has just happened, we got a good question came in on Facebook. Barbara said, how did this decision go through the Ninth Circuit? Well, it started in district courts. There were 3 different district court judges that issued an injunction saying that the Trump rule, the rule that was put forward by the administration, was unconstitutional. And then it so it was appealed. That means the administration, Department of Justice, appeals it to the Ninth Circuit. 3 judges are selected for the appeal. That was heard. They issued what's called a per curiam opinion, which was saying that that law could go in effect, that was constitutional. Now what's happened is Planned Parenthood has gone back now, not just to the 3, but to all of the judges. It's called en banc review, the entire Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And my guess is they'll probably end up hearing it, which means the case ends up likely at the Supreme Court of the United States, which I think we would win at least 5-4, maybe even 6-3. All right, let's change gears. We're still talking about the life issue. Big day for life at 800-684-3110. Missouri denies a new license to a Planned Parenthood clinic out of St. Louis. The reason is 4 botched abortions. Now, this issue was significant, and it was licensing applications. You have the case there. You have cases in Louisiana. And there's a whole series of cases going on all over the country on abortion. Let's talk a little bit about what happened in Missouri, Cece.
Sure. Okay, so Missouri has rules that, abortion clinics have to be inspected. So, and that's how they get their license. So what happened was the last abortion clinic in Missouri basically lost its license based on 4 failed abortions. So they're doing an investigation in that, that just seems like a no-brainer. Obviously, you've had 4 failed abortions. You need to investigate. They probably don't need a license. But the judge just today said that they can still operate because his injunction basically overrules their license lapsing.
So you've got to understand what's happened here. The licensing authority for the state says this facility, let's say it was just a regular hospital, this hospital is not safe. And a judge comes in and says, no, I think it is safe. And that Judge Harry Hutchinson gets to say, I think it's safe, therefore I overrule the state board that approves whether hospitals can open or not.
And that decision by the court is beyond the court's competence and, I would argue, authority. It's important to note that in addition to 4 failed abortions, there is evidence of at least 30 deficiencies. And those evidence on that particular issue was presented to the judge last week. But the judge, I think, is prepared to ignore the facts right in front of his own eyes in order to keep this abortion clinic open. This clinic arguably poses a clear and present danger to the health of women in Missouri. Nonetheless, this judge, I think, is prepared to keep it open.
So, Than, let's talk about the life issue generally. You've got a big divide in the United States Congress on this. We're looking at it here at a very local level, what's happening in Missouri right now. But you look at this on a national level, this issue is going to be a big issue in the 2020 election.
It's going to be a big issue, Jay, but unfortunately in Washington, D.C., it has become almost impossible to be a pro-life Democrat, even on these moderate issues in Washington, D.C., Jay. I mean, if you are against taxpayer funding of abortion, you're essentially primaried out of the Democrat Party. And look, this issue you're talking about in Missouri and Louisiana, I think this is a great example of the divide in Washington, D.C., because, look, no matter your view on abortion, Jay, we ought to be able to all agree that abortion can be a dangerous procedure and that health and safety standards should certainly apply to clinics, and women should be given access to the information about the procedure that they're about ready to undergo. Jay, in the most extreme situations, what Planned Parenthood and officials here in Washington, D.C. are opposing is a requirement that an abortion clinic be able to admit that woman to a hospital should she need it after the procedure. Can you imagine opposing that requirement? And yet, here in Washington, if you want to be a Democrat elected official, you pretty much have to stand with Planned Parenthood in opposing a clinic's being required to admit a woman to a hospital if that procedure goes awry.
You know, to me, it's the idea that you have the authority of the health inspector, basically, of hospitals, makes a determination. And unless that determination is arbitrary and capricious, and here they're investigating ongoing medical issues within that facility, plus 30 other items. And then for a federal judge to come and say, well, I don't care, I'm going to issue an injunction, say that the licensing authority, you have to, even though they're not technically not licensed, CC, you have to allow them to operate.
So now you have an unlicensed.
Just because it's the issue of abortion.
Yeah, you have an unlicensed clinic that's still operating. And this goes to exactly Planned Parenthood's rhetoric and judges that are pro-abortion. They don't care about the women. They don't care about anything. They don't care about anything that they say. Only abortion. If they cared about the women, they go, oh my heavens, we don't want women going to an unlicensed clinic. I can't even imagine that. As a woman myself, I can't imagine.
Would you go to an unlicensed dentist?
No.
I mean,
No.
this is absurd.
Yes.
But it's, Harry, all the rules change when it's abortion. It's like there's a set of rules for healthcare if it's heart, if it's orthopedics, if whatever it might be. But if it's abortion, all the rules are different.
I think that's correct. Essentially, if you look at judges, particularly those that lean left, abortion has become the preeminent litmus test. It's a preeminent litmus test for support of individual autonomy, totally unregulated individuality, and it is basically the leading issue for Democrats who are running for president. That's number one. Number two, what we fail to remember, I think, is that abortion, if we go back to the days of Margaret Sanger, it was linked, as Justice Thomas correctly pointed out recently, it was linked inescapably to eugenics. And so there is a component of eugenics connected to abortion that we should never forget.
I'm holding in my hand, I'm getting it for our television audience, Facebook and Periscope right now, 3 briefs that have been filed by your American Center for Law and Justice. This does not include, as Stan said, the comments that were filed when some of these rules and regulations were going forward. We're also working on another brief right now on this issue of life. So that's happening literally as we speak. So these laws and these rules, as they're being litigated, we're doing it front and center. So here's what I want to tell you. Your support of the ACLJ makes a big difference. So I would encourage you. We've got an email out today signing a petition to support pro-life laws. Let me encourage you to go to aclj.org and sign on to that, because we are fighting these wherever we can. As we get information, as we learn things, we're getting in court. We're getting involved early in this process. I mean, as Stan said, and I think, Stan, it's worth reiterating here, that the process of rules coming out of Washington, especially on the issues like this, start with comments and what that means, and we're engaging at that level.
Yeah, think about it on this one, Jay. I mean, we were advocating for a return to the statutory requirements for Title X since before this administration came in. We advocated that the Department of Health and Human Services essentially issued the rule that they eventually did. They did a very good job crafting it. But then, Jay, it opens up to public comment. So we did 2 things. First of all, we filed very lengthy legal arguments in defense of the law, rooting it back to the statute. We also provided an opportunity for ACLJ members to issue individual comments, which all get tallied up and show the department that there is support across America for the rules as proposed, then those rules go final and actually get put into play. And of course, inevitably, Jay, they're challenged in court. So then we have to go to court and we have to file those multiple briefs that you held up, and we have to litigate it through the process. And like you said, there's a couple more stages still to go. I think ultimately it will return to the Supreme Court and be basically a rehash of Russ v. Sullivan, when we'll win. But Jay, the underlying point here is that you have to engage it early, you have to engage it often, and here's maybe the big one, Jay. You can't get tired of it either. You have to sustain it all the way through the process. Otherwise, you will lose. We're going to win this in the end, Jay, but you've got to see it all the way through.
You also got to understand that Planned Parenthood is unrelenting in this. I mean, they are an unrelenting adversary.
That's right. Never stop. And we're in the Supreme Court right now in the Louisiana case. We filed another amicus brief, which we followed that one all the way up. And basically just showing that abortion is a hazardous procedure. I mean, with all the 911 calls that come out of abortion clinics, this is what we're advocating. We don't stop. We start at the beginning and we follow it through all the way to the end.
Let me play Secretary Azar making his statement about this administration's life position.
Let me be really clear. President Trump, Vice President Pence, and I are part of a pro-life administration. We stand for protecting the sanctity of human life from conception until natural death. Part of that is this regulation you mentioned that we put out that prevents these Title X family planning monies from going to supporting the abortion enterprise. For too long, that money has been used to subsidize the provision of abortion.
Could not be much clearer than that. Let's go ahead and take David's call out of Michigan on line 1. Hi, David. Welcome to the broadcast. You're on the air.
Hi, Jay. Thanks for taking my call. I was just listening to your broadcast today, and it just hit me that Planned Parenthood has become so powerful.
Yep.
And so influential, and it's just mind-boggling to me that this is allowed to happen over the years, to the point where even Joe Biden would flip like he does just for the sake of gaining office.
Well, it's becoming an issue that's divided the country for a long time, but it's out now, of course, clearly, you got to understand something. Planned Parenthood is in the business of abortion. That is their business. And we'll talk more about that when we come back from the break. And they are a powerful organization. I mean, Dan will tell you, Dan, quickly, we're near a break. You meet them every day. I mean, they're there every day. In Washington.
Every day on the street, Jay, but the first way to start stripping them of their power, deny them the $500 million that taxpayers fund them. That's where you start.
Your support of the ACLJ makes this happen. So we're in a matching challenge campaign. Let me encourage you to go to aclj.org. Any amount you donate to the ACLJ is matched. aclj.org, or call the number on your screen. Back with more in just a moment.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
All right, everybody, last segment. Kathy on Facebook says, when did abortion begin to define party lines? Than. It's been going on for a long time.
Well, it's been trending that way for a long time, but I'll tell you, when I started my career in Washington, D.C. about 20 years ago, it was not hard to find a pro-life Democrat. It's almost impossible now, Jay, and it's not just because they've been defeated in general elections. It's because they've been primaried out.
Yes.
It is no longer acceptable inside the Democrat Party to be pro-life. And look, I think the proof is in the pudding. When you go down to defend the Hyde Amendment on the floor of the Senate, you can't find anyone there on the Democrat side of the aisle to support you. And by the way, if you do, what happens when you decide to run for president like Joe Biden did? Planned Parenthood comes out and forces you to change your position. That's just reality.
I'll tell you something interesting. When we first were doing these briefs for Congress, we would oftentimes have, and there weren't a lot of them, but there were several pro-life. I remember Heath Shuler, some of the others. that you had out of North Carolina. There was a couple of others, Stan, that we had that would sign the briefs all the time on the life issue, and they were Democrats. So you'd have a brief you'd file to the Supreme Court representing Republicans and Democrats, bipartisan. Those days are pretty much they are done. Is there a pro-life Democrat left?
There is. Dan Lipinski from Illinois in the House continues to fairly consistently support the measures. But, Jay, I'll tell you, the only reason he survived is because he's been able to beat back primary challenges from the pro-abortion left. So it has come at a political price even for him. And the political price for most of them has been they've lost their seat. And just one more example, Jay. Just this week, the House of Representatives passed a funding bill that essentially rolls back all of the pro-life rules that the Trump administration has put in place, including, Jay, the one we're talking about today. They would not only repeal this rule, but they would raise the Title X funding from $286 million to $400 million and allow that money to be taken away from women's health care and sent to abortion. It's just another example of elections having consequences.
All right, Charlotte on Facebook said, how will Planned Parenthood try and appeal this decision, or can they? Yes, they can, and they're going to do it en banc, Harry.
Yes, they will appeal this decision, and more likely than not, they will face not necessarily strong opposition from the en banc panel. Essentially, what Planned Parenthood will argue is that the law ought to be reinterpreted according to quote-unquote contemporary standards. And so if you look at the three district court decisions at issue here, 3 district courts effectively amended Section 1008 of the public health law, despite the fact that the text of the law explicitly prohibits funding for abortion-related programs. So I think it's clear beyond question that there is a quintessential problem in not only the courts, but in our law schools. We are simply not teaching law students how to read textual language free from political bias.
Well, Michael on Facebook says, if Democrats take Congress and the presidency, how extreme will they become? Will they increase Planned Parenthood funding? No,
yes.
Go ahead.
If the Democrats totally take over, I mean, Than just said it. They've already introduced legislation that is trying to undo every pro-life thing the current administration has done. I think that's very telling.
Yeah. So, Than, let's talk about that for a moment, because the fact of the matter is the reality of the situation is that that's exactly what they would do. I mean, and they're not. It's not like they're hiding the ball here. I mean, this is a platform they're running on. So I'm not saying this in a pejorative way. It's in fact the position they're advocating.
Yeah, no, it's front and center, Jay. In fact, I think they would be glad that you're advocating it because they're advocating it. 2 things. First of all, day one of an administration led by any of the candidates on the Democrat side of the aisle right now, the Mexico City policy, which President Trump reinstated, would be reinserted. That would allow your tax dollars to be used for abortion overseas. They would also immediately reverse several of the domestic rules, including this one we're talking about today, and Planned Parenthood would again have access to Title X funds. But, Jay, number 2, on the legislative side of the ledger, and I don't have time to go through everything, but let me just tell you what the Democrat House of Representatives did this week alone. Just this week, they passed a bill that would repeal the Title X ruling we're talking about today and increase the funding for that account from $286 million to $400 million. They repealed the Trump administration's conscience protection rule. They repealed the President Trump's rule on fetal tissue, which is human tissue from abortions being used for research. Jay, they repealed the Mexico City policy of President Trump. They reinstated funding for the United Nations Population Fund, which uses abortion as a method of family planning, and they plussed up that account to the tune of $750 million. Jay, to say nothing of the fact that in that same bill, they also blocked the president's transfer authority to use dollars to build the wall. So look, that's just a glimmer. That's a fraction of what you would see if you had Democrats running both the White House and both chambers of Congress.
No, I think that, look, don't think for a moment that wouldn't be the case. And again, as I said, they are running on this fact. Now, let's talk about Louisiana for a moment here. What do we got down there?
Okay, so Louisiana has some good pro-life legislation that we have followed all the way up. It's now in the Supreme Court, and it's the Gee case. And we have filed an amicus brief that's basically supporting Louisiana's interest in protecting human life, even a baby and the mother. And so our brief argues and touches on the fact that abortion is a potentially hazardous procedure, and the claim that abortion is safer than childbirth is a complete myth. And, that published literature indicates that if anything, abortion is more dangerous than a continued pregnancy. We have 2.5 pages, which is only a small portion of the actual list of 911 calls that went out just in a year from abortion clinics taking a mother in an emergency, that something has gone wrong, bleeding, something has gone terribly wrong.
Yeah, so Louisiana is now again, these cases are going to, and look, there's a lot of them, and we're monitoring them all over the country, and we're engaging in them even at the district court level as these cases move forward, because what's happening is you don't know which one's going to end up at the Supreme Court. The fact of the matter is it's very hard to predict, to say that case is going to be the one that goes to the Supreme Court on this issue. So what we've decided internally here at the ACLJ is we're going to be involved in as many as we can really get done, which is a lot. We've got a big team because of your support of the ACLJ. So we are staying on top of that. I don't think there's going to be any major legislation on the federal level. That means the states where this is happening, the regulations are being put in place at the state level, and that's where you have to really focus our attention on the litigation, because I don't see a lot of movement. I mean, you had the Title X one, obviously a big win out of the Ninth Circuit for now, come just yesterday. But most of these regulations are going on the state level. But Planned Parenthood is going to be very, very aggressive in how they challenge these as well.
And here's the thing that we all have to understand too. Why are these legislators pushing abortion so much? Trust me, if you follow the money, Planned Parenthood supports these campaigns of all these Democrats, so they basically own them. I can recall in New York when we had that case, I think there were 59 at the city council. There were 59 city council members. I think only 5 of them were Republican, and almost every single one of those, we looked into it, Planned Parenthood had given to their campaign. So of course they were pushing Planned Parenthood's legislation because they own them, basically.
They're a formidable foe fan, no question about it.
Yeah, Cece's absolutely correct. Money's fungible. The Action Fund certainly supports these candidates. Jay, again, the first step, let's not give them $563.8 million from U.S. taxpayers. That's step number one.
I agree. That's going to do it for the broadcast today. Let me encourage you to do something. As we talk about each of these cases all over the country, Louisiana, Missouri, California, Oregon, your support of the ACLJ allows us to engage these from the comment level all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. We're in a matching challenge campaign, which means any amount you donate to us, we get a matching gift for. Let me encourage you to do that at aclj.org.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.